Hey everyone, Elton Bronet here. And let's be honest, we all make mistakes. Some of us burn dinner, others miss a deadline, and then there are those who accidentally launch into a disastrous war based on faulty intelligence. Okay, maybe that last one is a bit more specific to certain professions, like, say, being the President of the United States. In this video, we're diving headfirst into the turbulent waters of American history to examine the top 7 worst decisions ever made by US presidents. From ill-fated invasions to disastrous economic policies, we're going deep on these presidential blunders. We'll explore who made the call, what went wrong, and how it impacted not just the United States but the world at large. But this isn't just a history lesson, oh no. We're also asking the tough question, are we still dealing with the fallout of these decisions today? So buckle up because things are about to get messy. Our first presidential blunder takes us back to the sunny shores of Cuba in 1961. Picture this. The Cold War is in full swing, and a young, charismatic president named John F. Kennedy is in the Oval Office. This is the backdrop for the infamous Bay of Pigs invasion. The plan, hatched during the Eisenhower administration but greenlit by JFK, was to overthrow Fidel Castro's regime. The idea was to train Cuban exiles, land them on the island, and spark an uprising. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but things didn't go according to plan. The invasion was a colossal failure, with the exile force quickly defeated by Castro's troops. The US was left with a serious case of international egg on its face. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a foreign policy disaster for the Kennedy administration. It pushed Cuba further into the arms of the Soviet Union, leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis. This event cast a long shadow over US-Cuban relations for decades. Even today, the Bay of Pigs serves as a reminder of the dangers of covert operations and foreign intervention. Fast forward a few decades and we find ourselves facing another controversial chapter in US foreign policy, the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This time it's George W. Bush at the helm, a president who, after the 9/11 attacks, vowed to fight terrorism on all fronts. The Bush administration argued that Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and posed a direct threat to the United States. This claim, fueled by faulty intelligence and hawkish advisors, became the primary justification for invading Iraq. However, the war quickly became a quagmire. No WMDs were ever found, and the invasion plunged Iraq into chaos, creating a power vacuum that allowed groups like ISIS to flourish. The human cost of the Iraq War was staggering, with hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians estimated to have died as a direct result of the conflict. The war also placed a heavy burden on the US economy, costing trillions of dollars and diverting resources from other pressing domestic issues. The Iraq War remains a deeply divisive issue in American society, with many arguing that it was based on false pretenses and had devastating consequences for both the US and the Middle East. The rise of ISIS, the ongoing instability in the region, and the displacement of millions of Iraqis are all part of the war's complex and tragic legacy. For our next presidential blunder, we're traveling back to the tumultuous years of the Great Depression. The year is 1930, and the US economy is in freefall. Unemployment is skyrocketing, businesses are collapsing, and people are struggling to put food on the table. Enter President Herbert Hoover, a man who, despite his best intentions, would become synonymous with one of the most disastrous economic policies in American history, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was designed to protect American businesses and farmers from foreign competition by raising tariffs on thousands of imported goods. The idea was that by making foreign goods more expensive, Americans would buy American-made products, thus boosting the domestic economy. However, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act had the opposite effect. Instead of helping the economy, it sent it into a tailspin. Other countries retaliated by imposing their own tariffs, bringing global trade to a screeching halt. This trade war deepened the Great Depression not just in the US, but around the world. It became a stark illustration of the interconnectedness of the global economy and the dangers of protectionist policies. Our journey through presidential blunders takes us back to the early days of the American Republic, a time when westward expansion and the pursuit of manifest destiny came at a terrible cost. This chapter focuses on one of the darkest chapters in American history, the forced removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson, a hero of the War of 1812 and a staunch advocate for westward expansion, signed the Indian Removal Act. This law authorized the president to negotiate treaties with Native American tribes living east of the Mississippi River, exchanging their lands for territory in the west. The Indian Removal Act set in motion a period of forced migration that would become known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands of Native Americans, primarily from the Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations, were driven from their homes and forced to march thousands of miles to designated Indian territory in present-day Oklahoma. The conditions on the Trail of Tears were brutal. Disease, starvation, and exposure took a heavy toll on the displaced tribes, with thousands dying during the journey. The forced removal of Native Americans from their lands was a moral and humanitarian catastrophe. The legacy of the Trail of Tears continues to haunt the U.S. It serves as a stark reminder of the broken treaties, the forced assimilation policies, and the systemic discrimination faced by Native American communities throughout American history. We're back in the throes of the Cold War, but this time the battleground is the dense jungles of Vietnam. The year is 1964. Lyndon B. Johnson, after Kennedy's assassination, finds himself entangled in a conflict that would define his presidency. The Vietnam War was rooted in French colonialism, Vietnamese nationalism, and the Cold War struggle. The U.S., fearing the domino effect of communism, had been aiding South Vietnam since the 1950s. The Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964 provided Johnson with the pretext for escalating U.S. involvement. The incident, where North Vietnamese boats allegedly attacked U.S. destroyers, remains controversial. Johnson used the incident to push the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, granting him broad military authority. The war escalated with the U.S. deploying hundreds of thousands of troops. The war became increasingly unpopular in the U.S., with growing anti-war protests. The Vietnam War had a profound impact on American society, leaving deep scars. It led to a loss of faith in government and a deep sense of disillusionment among Americans. Our next presidential blunder takes us back to the early 1970s, a time of social and political upheaval in the United States. This chapter delves into a scandal so significant that it would forever be linked with the president at its center, Richard Nixon, and the Watergate Scandal. The Watergate Scandal began with a seemingly minor break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate Hotel in June 1972. However, what initially appeared to be a third-rate burglary attempt quickly unraveled into a major political scandal that would rock the nation and bring down a president. As investigators dug deeper into the Watergate break-in, they uncovered a web of political espionage, dirty tricks, and a cover-up that reached the highest levels of the Nixon administration. The scandal exposed a pattern of abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and a disregard for the rule of law. The Watergate scandal had a profound impact on American politics and society. It eroded public trust in government, fueled cynicism towards politicians, and led to a period of national soul-searching. Our final presidential blunder takes us all the way back to the early days of the American Republic, a time when the ink on the Constitution was barely dry. This chapter examines a controversial period in American history, when the very principles of free speech and freedom of the press were put to the test, the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. The Alien and Sedition Acts were a series of 4 laws passed by the Federalist-controlled Congress and signed into law by President John Adams. The laws were enacted in the context of growing tensions with France, known as the Quasi-War, and were aimed at silencing opposition to the Federalist Party and its policies. The Alien and Sedition Acts were highly controversial from the outset. Critics argued that they violated the First Amendment's guarantees of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. The Sedition Act, in particular, was used to prosecute and imprison journalists, publishers, and ordinary citizens who dared to criticize the government. The Alien and Sedition Acts were a significant test for the young American Republic. They raised fundamental questions about the balance between national security and individual liberties, the role of government in a free society, and the very meaning of American democracy. So there you have it, folks. 7 presidential decisions that shook the nation and, in some cases, the world. From disastrous invasions to economic policies that backfired spectacularly, We've seen how even the most powerful leaders can make colossal mistakes. But remember, history isn't just about looking back. It's about understanding how the past shapes the present and hopefully, learning from the mistakes of those who came before us. As we've seen, the consequences of these presidential blunders continue to reverberate today, reminding us of the importance of critical thinking, thoughtful leadership, and a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to those in power. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Which of these presidential decisions do you think was the worst? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content, and share this video with your friends. Until next time, stay curious.